Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Ed Opperman, private investigator. Every Friday night, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. Now, tonight, we have a great guest. And for you guys that know me out there that listen all the time, this is the kind of guest that inspired to do a radio show. This is the kind of guy that I want to have on, the kind of information that I want to present to you each week. Dave McGowan. Now, he's the author of Program to Kill, and he's also the author of a book just about to come out, which is Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. He's also written a book called Understanding the F Word, and the F word is fascism. Okay, and this is what we need to hear more about this kind of stuff. People standing up and speaking out against fascism. And his first book was Derailing Democracy, and he has a dog. All these books, he's a dog lover and a dog owner. All these books are available on Amazon. You can find the links on my blog, The Opperman Report. But he also has I think he's being eaten by his dog right now as he talks. But he has a blog called the Center for Informed America. Okay, and that's at www.davesweb.cnhost.com. Okay, but if you just put in Dave McGowan, Program to Kill, his website will pop up. It's one of the first ones, Center for an Informed America. And I understand that if you order this book, Weird Scenes from Inside the Canyon, he has a hardcover book coming out that he'll even autograph for you. So, Dave, are you there?
I am indeed here. I'm still alive. My dog has not managed.
I thought it was a son of damn dog.
She's quite a handful, actually. She's a Doberman, and she's huge. She's like much bigger than Dobermans are supposed to be. She weighs somewhere around like 115 pounds, and she can be rather rambunctious at times. So I'm gonna do my best to keep her under control here. But anyway, thank you very much for having me on. I'm thrilled to be here for the first time. So.
Yeah, and there's so much. You have so much information, all these different books, and your website. The website, Center for an Informed America, has everything. Has 9/11, has a DC sniper. There's a ton of stuff on there. But where do you want to start? You want to start with the Laurel Canyon stuff?
I suppose that seems to be the thing that most people want to talk about right now with the pending book release and whatnot, and it apparently gathered quite a following as in its original form as a web-based series, and I get emails I've like done everything I can to inform people of why the series is no longer available in its entirety on my website, but I'm still getting inundated with emails from irate people asking me why the series is no longer available. And I pulled it all down for a couple of reasons. Number one, because my publisher has made quite an investment in this project, and all of his costs and cover designs and printing and distribution and all that. So it doesn't really seem fair to him to have it still freely available. And also the other reason is that I honestly feel that it is a much better told story now. I put just hundreds of hours of additional work into it, and I've added a number of new chapters and augmented several other chapters, and just done a lot of cleanup work and reorganizing, and I think it's just a much better read now. And the having that other, it's kind of like having a circulating. So for both of those reasons, I took the majority of the Laurel Canyon material down from my website, and much to the chagrin of some of my readers, but it will be available very soon in both a limited edition hardback and a trade paperback that are both coming out in the next couple of months. So I think it will be worth the wait.
Okay, great. So why don't you give us, for the people who aren't familiar with the work, the Laurel Canyon story, the weird scenes in Laurel Canyon. Give us an overview. What's going on with that?
Well, a lot's going on with it, and And as I explain in the preface, which is another new part of the book, I added a preface at my publisher's instigation to explain, kind of how and why this book came about. And there's also a new foreword added by Nick Bryant. I don't know if you're familiar with the author of Franklin Scandal.
Oh,
but anyway, yeah, he wrote a foreword for it. So, but anyway, it began really innocently enough. My daughter had actually gotten me for Christmas, like 6 or 7 years ago. She had gotten me Michael Walker's on Laurel Canyon, which I was really interested in reading, and because that was really the music that kind of provided the soundtrack to my youth, my formative years. It's that was what I was listening to. So, I was interested in the topic just in a non-conspiratorial sort of way, and I was getting ready to go on vacation, and I thought that would be sort of the perfect escapist entertainment, just the perfect beach to just lay on the beach and forget about all the weirdness in the world and, just conjure up all these, fond memories of my youth and whatnot. But it didn't work out that way because as I was reading through this book, all these alarm bells started going off, and just sort of the casual throwaway facts that were in there, like he just kind of mentioned in an offhand way that there was without elaboration, that there was a secret military installation in operation right there in Laurel Canyon during its musical heyday. And, and a few mentions of like the family backgrounds of some of these people and brushed upon some of the violent backdrop with the connections of the Manson murders and the Wonderland murders and a few other, various violent deaths. And so by the time I got back from, on vacation, I was just chomping at the bit to dig deeper into this, and I just started just buying up everything I could find, every book and magazine article and web post and everything I could find that had ever been written on the topic in the era. And as I started going through it, these pieces just kept falling into place. All these, things that just didn't seem to fit in with the whole peace and love vibe that was, and the notion that this was just an organic movement that sort of arose in response to the Vietnam War and various other social conditions of time. And, the more I look at it, the more it just, there were just so many acts that just did not fit in with the prevailing image and, this whole violent backdrop and all of the, military and intelligence, family connections, and the fact that all of these people that just happen to be sons and daughters of the military intelligence establishment happen to be clustered in this one little neighborhood around a covert military facility, and just on and on and on, and it's it's just just more and more of the pieces just came together, and I realized that this was that there was a whole other story here, that even though Michael Walker and a few other people, Barney Hopkins and Harvey Kaepernick and a couple of Johnson, I think, and a couple other guys, a couple of rock journalists have covered the scene to some extent from a mainstream perspective. I realized that there was a whole nother story, an even bigger story, hiding in the details of all these kind of little throwaway facts that these other people had just sort of tossed aside, And so that's really where it came from, and it's been a 6 or 7 year process of of doing it as a web-based series, which I'm glad I did instead of doing it as a book initially, because that's enabled me to really expand a lot upon because a lot of the information was just sort of a domino effect of readers sending me bits and pieces, and some of them were personal anecdotes, which I couldn't really use because there's no way to verify them. But a lot of the information was,
some of those personal anecdotes. Maybe you can give them on the air.
I don't have any of them handy, but Yeah, but but a lot of the information was also tipping me off to various print sources and whatnot, and allowed me to uncover a lot of information that I probably would not have been able to do on my own. So so it worked out really well to run it for a number of years as a web series and to sort of expand upon it as it went along, and it just grew and kind of took on a life of its own, and apparently has, over the last, 5-6 years or whatever, has reached a much, much wider audience than ever imagined. And, now that I'm in the process of, getting ready for the book release, it's been kind of a revelation, overwhelming at times to realize that I have a lot of fans out there that I just, I've been getting these, I go on these radio shows and I get these just glowing introductions where I'm sitting there thinking, are they going to introduce me or is there somebody else on the show, and I put up a Facebook page, which, has gotten no real promotion other than word of mouth, and it's just a tremendous response. Like, I've already gotten 850 likes or something, which, I'm sure pales in comparison to, a lot of on Facebook, but to me, I'm just stunned that this book's not even really, due out for general release for 2 more months, and nobody's even been able to review it or anything, and obviously it hasn't gotten any kind of mainstream exposure or anything, and yet it's already building. I've gotten something like 200 requests for signed copies, and just hundreds of likes on Facebook, and it's kind of humbling and a little overwhelming to find that so many people have been following my work over all these years, and I really had no idea.
Oh no, yeah, the work is legendary. Okay, in the circles that I travel in, yeah, in the people who listen to this show and who know me, this work is legendary, my friend. Okay, we love this stuff, and even everyone talks about you, and they say, oh yeah, he's so hard to get a hold of. He never gets back to you, like other hosts interview you, and it's almost impossible to find your website too, like because the davesweb.cnhost.com. Like I tell you, you really got to go searching. People are hungry for this information, and you put it together.
My website address and my website design are both like from, I don't know, the 1970s or something.
Yeah. Before the internet.
Yeah, they're like pre-internet.
Yeah. All right, let's get into it.
Yeah, I know.
The secret, no, not the secret, but the military base that's in Laurel Canyon, because I heard about this before I ever heard about you. And when I heard it, it was at I was 12 years old, and I was taking the Universal tour. And I remember them saying that this is the largest privately owned soundstage in the world, in Universal Studios. So I asked them, I said, well, who owns the other one? And they said, oh, there's another one. What's it called? Looking Stock or Looking Glass or something? Lookout? Lookout
Mountain Laboratory was what it was, the official title.
Now, I picked up, too, some other times I was watching Johnny Carson one time, and I heard Bob Hope referencing that he was down there filming. But then, like, where are these films shown? Where are they being, what are they doing there, and where's it being used?
Yeah, there was a lot of big-name talent from Hollywood that was used there, both actors and directors. I mean, people like John Wayne, Marilyn Monroe, Jimmy Stewart, John Ford, big legendary names in the business that did some kind of classified work there that to this day, they never talked about it. I mean, I guess, from what you're saying, apparently every once in a while a little something would slip out, but for the most part, it was kept very well under wraps, and, these stars took their secrets to their graves, for the most part, and, we don't really know what was going on there, but it was in operation for a long time, and it was apparently the most complete state-of-the-art, turnkey, so to speak, film studio in the world. They had facilities to do everything. They had editing, animation, They had film vaults. They had sound stages. They didn't need to subcontract out anything. They could make a complete motion picture within those walls. And it was the only studio like that in the world. And it operated in complete secrecy for decades. And, of course, we don't know if there were other functions, you know, other than just as that was its official function, was as a film studio and film processing lab. And, but, you know, who knows whether there were other operations being run out of it, you know? It's impossible to say.
Right. Okay, that's just amazing because we have no idea what movies or commercials or whatever came out of this studio. Because obviously something was there, you know? So did you ever talk to anybody who worked there or anything like that?
No, nobody has ever admitted to it, you know? No, and it's still in existence. It was just vacant for a long time, and then for a while it was a residential property, and most recently, from the news that I've read, in just the last 6 months, it's now been converted into a, love this, it's been converted into a high-end, celebrity rehab center.
Oh, wow.
So it's basically still a programming center, you know.
Yeah.
It has recently been repurposed as a one of these real high-end exclusive celebrity rehab centers, along the line of like the Betty Ford Center, places where Lindsay Lohan and Britney Spears check in for a tune-up,
Yeah, I got you. Yeah, I hear you with that. Okay, my goodness. Okay, so now give us the overall story. The thing is that in the 60s, the music industry, there was a change in culture, and it all was birthed out of Laurel Canyon, and all these guys had military connections and stuff like that. So why don't you give us that story?
Yeah, I mean, that's, the weird thing about Laurel Canyon is, and I mentioned that several books have now been written, kind of mainstream versions of the Laurel Canyon story, but still to this day, it remains, even the mainstream version of it, is not that well known by people. When people think about the 60s music scene, and particularly even more so the 60s countercultural scene, the hippies, the flower children, all that sort of thing, they automatically, almost universally think of the Haight-Ashbury up in San Francisco. That is the place that is universally associated as being the birthplace and the spiritual center of the hippie movement, and that's not even actually true. It was actually the Laurel Canyon scene preceded that by a couple of years, and was much bigger. There were many more bands that came out of the Laurel Canyon scene, that shaped the musical landscape than what came out of San Francisco. So it was not only a precursor to the hate scene, it was actually much bigger and ultimately more influential, because that's where the whole hippie look and the hairstyles, the clothing styles, and everything that's associated with that whole era really started in Laurel Canyon. So it's it's a very, very important place to sort of focus our attention, and yet for almost 50 years now, our attention instead has been focused on the scene up north, the parallel scene up north, which was just as weird. But the Laurel Canyon scene has gone largely unexplored. Most people, even native people that are native Angelenos that grew up here are not aware of just and I mean, it's staggering the number of bands that came out of there in a very short period of time. You had the Byrds, you had the Doors, you had Buffalo Springfield, Crosby, Stills and Nash, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Poco, the Flying Burrito Brothers, the Turtles, Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, Three Dog Night, the Beach Boys, and then all the singer-songwriters. You had Warren Zevon and Jackson Browne and Linda Ronstadt, Judy Collins and Joni Mitchell and Carole King and Paul Williams, and I mean it's just a mind-boggling. You wonder how they all found room in it, because it's not a very large geographic area. We're not even talking about a city. We're talking about a neighborhood within Los Angeles. It's sort of semi-remote, somewhat isolated, very unique neighborhood in Los Angeles up in the Hollywood Hills, and it's just mind-boggling array of musical talent just showed up there, you know, from like, say, 1966 to 1969 over a period of just a few years. There seems just all these people and one of the strange things about that is that Los Angeles was not a hub of the music industry at the time. It is now. It is the main. But people, Los Angeles was the place to go, but that wasn't true. And, you know, the reality is that the Laurel Canyon scene made LA the hub of the music industry, not the other way around. So, you know, there was no real the music scene was pretty much centered in three places in those days. Nashville, which was the home of the country music scene, and New York, which was sort of the home of popular music, and the Brill Building and all the songwriting that came out of there, and then the Motown scene, which was out of Detroit, I think.
Yeah.
And so, Los Angeles wasn't even really on the map, and yet all of these people just out of nowhere and just started flooding into this one neighborhood and set up and created not only the musical scene, but the whole sort of countercultural social scene. And it didn't really make sense that would be the place that they would go, but that's where they went. And, simultaneously, all of these clubs just started popping up like mushrooms, to provide them with venues to play in, because there was no real live music scene in LA either. And, it was just like the stars were in perfect alignment, all of these people just happened to show up, and all of these clubs just happened to open up, and all of these guys were like, draft age, males for the most part. And, obviously there was a war and a draft going on at the time, and which was what supposedly inspired the whole scene. And we're supposed to believe that these were sort of countercultural figures, that they were kind of sticking it to the man and, this and that. But, if you look, it just seemed like everything just fell into place for these people, and all of a sudden they had their own publications and they had their own radio stations, and the major labels were grabbing them up and signing them. These weren't people that were being signed by like indie labels, and so it wasn't sort of a grassroots sort of movement. This was a very corporate movement where, the biggest players in the games were the ones that were signing these people, and the biggest radio stations were the ones promoting them, and the biggest circulation mainstream publications were the ones actively promoting them. And so the whole thing the whole notion that this was like an organic response to the war just starts to fade away when you look at all the coincidences that, number one, that all these people showed up here at the time they did, and just, happened to immediately land recording contracts and were promoted relentlessly, and, they all just managed to get draft deferments, and,
I was going to bring that up. Yeah, they were all draft age, and they were all in military families. None of them were in the military. They were all using and selling drugs. If these people were really posing a problem for the powers that be, there were numerous ways that they could have been brought into, that the movement could have been shut down, that it could have been stifled, that these voices could have been silenced, and without even resorting to like heavy-handed approach, because there was a draft, and they were all of them were vulnerable to the draft, but all of them managed to avoid it. I mean, there's not one musician, even like a low-ranking, even like the drummer for the Turtles or whatever, I mean, you can't find a single case where any of these people had their careers disrupted by the ongoing war in Vietnam. Elvis was the last one, I think, right?
Yeah, and they were openly flouting the nation's drug laws. They were almost tempting the authorities to crack down on them, and yet time after time they were treated with kid gloves on the occasions when when an arrest was made. They would invariably walk away without So, you know, I mean, you gotta, why was it corporate America and, you know, the titans of industry that were promoting these people, and why was the state not using all of the powers that it had at its disposal to silence them if they were, in fact, what we are supposed to believe that they were, you know? And then, you know, the fact that they're all military families and they're all clustered around a military compound, and, you know, at some point there's just too many things wrong with this story to, you know, accept that it was what we are supposed to believe that it was.
Gotcha.
You know?
Coming up to a break, man, but we have Dave McGowan, the author of Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. Amazing information. When we get back, we're going to get into the Manson family, Timothy Leary. I'm going to tell Dave about my life. I used to be a hippie, Dave. I was a member of the New York City. I'm going to tell you about that. And I think we were on the same page, you and me, with a lot of this information. Dave McGowan, Weird Scenes Inside Here. You can get a link to his book on the Opperman Report blog or on Dave's website, Center for Informed America. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman, every Friday night, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And I want to remind everybody, this is a listener-sponsored station. We have no corporate sponsorship. So if you like what you're hearing, if you want to be able to bring back guests like Dave McGowan, you got to visit the website, freedomslips.com. You got to click on the donate button to keep the station going. You want to keep good guests coming here, we got to visit their website, Center for Informed America, Dave's web. .cnhost.com. You're never going to find it, but good luck. But if you do find it, you can get an autographed copy by Dave Webb of his hardcover book, which would be a collector's item. Okay? So we're back with Dave McGowan. Now, Dave, we were talking about all the craziness, the military guys and all this stuff going on in Laurel Canyon. But there was a lot of other stuff going on, too, right? Like Timothy Leary and Charles Manson. And all this other wild stuff that was going on around that period of time as well. And the yippies, okay, Abby Hoffman and Jerry Rubin and these guys. What do you think today, looking back from our perspective now, of that whole movement?
I think that a lot of the people that the people in the hippie and yippie and flower children movements put their faith in back in those days were not at all what they appeared to be, you know, in regards, you know, to like Leary and Alpert and Kesey and his Merry Pranksters and you know, the Chicago Seven and you know, all the people that were sort of the figureheads at that time. I don't think they really hold up to scrutiny, it seemed like to me, although, you know, I mean, there's still a lot of people that just, you know, that still believe very firmly that they were the real deal, you know, and don't want to let go of their idols. But, yeah, to me, yeah, they don't come off as being legitimate at all, really, you know.
I hear you. I hear you. And I'm one of those guys that wants to believe, you know, that wants stuff. Because I think I'm sincere, you know, and I think you're sincere.
You know, I read all that stuff when I was a kid. Like I say, I grew up listening to the music, you know, and I read Hunter Thompson and I read Leary, and, you know, I mean, I kind of, you know, I always thought that I was kind of robbed because I was born in 1960, so I actually came of age in the 70s, which was like the most vapid musical decade in existence, you know. I don't know, maybe the 80s was. But, so, you know, I was, you know, during my high school and college days, I was still wearing bell-bottoms and paisley and, you know, spinning my Doors and Jimi Hendrix records and stuff. So I was kind of considered myself a hippie that just had the misfortune of being born a decade too late, you know. So, yeah, I mean, these people were my heroes through most of my life, actually, you know. So it was a difficult journey, you know. What started out as, you know, like I said, as sort of a diversion from the madness and just an escape ended up being a very difficult journey, you know, because I've had to leave a lot of my idols, on the roadside over the years. People that I, at one time thought were the real deal, and these guys were some of the biggest ones, and so it's difficult to learn that like that Jim Morrison's dad was basically the main actor behind the Gulf of Tonkin incident, and that Frank Zappa's dad was manufacturing chemical warfare agents like the napalm and white phosphorus and Agent 1. So you find out that these people were sort of these huge icons of the anti-war movement were the sons of the very people that were engineering the carnage, and that's not an easy pill to swallow, I'll be the first to admit it, and this whole backdrop of violence and, with the Manson, you mentioned Manson, who was so much more tightly integrated into the scene than anybody really likes to admit anymore, but, there was this whole backdrop of just a violent death, and
overdoses and stuff as well. Let me hit you real quick with some fast questions, though. Hunter S. Thompson, what do you think about the accusations about snuff porn and child pornography and stuff like that and connections to the Franklin cover-up and Aquino and stuff?
I actually find him credible in the areas where I sort of part company with my colleague Nick Bryant, who does not find him credible, and kind of took that position in his book. And I know John DeCamp took the accusations at face value. I find them credible, to be honest with you. The guy was a strange guy, to be sure. He basically lived in an armed compound, which, hardly fits in with the whole peace and love vibe that, he gave off in the 60s. And, utilized like the same attorneys as, the Ramsey parents and some high-ranking. His legal team is the same people that represented John and Patsy Ramsey, and various officials in the state officials in Colorado. The guy definitely has some questionable connections. His death was curious, and to me, you can't say definitively whether it's true or not, but to me, the accusations seem credible. I
hate to say it. I agree with you, and I was a big fan as well of his. You and I are about the same age. I was born in '62, and
I was huge. His Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was hugely influential on me.
I read it 50
times. Massively influential on me. It was that. A handful of books that really kind of shaped, to a large extent, who I am. Slaughterhouse-5, Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-5 was one of them, but Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas was definitely one, and it's
Did you read Fear and Loathing Campaign Trail?
I did read that one. I did not, I read several books actually. I was a huge fan. I read all of his early. I read Hell's Angels. I devoured all of his early stuff. He was this godlike figure to me, but I've heard and I've read a lot of stuff about him that would lead me to believe that the accusations are not, are not that crazy and reckless. They could, so. Yeah.
Okay, now what about Timothy Leary? Okay, here you got a guy. Well, forget it. He has mind control, government spook written all over him. When you look at his real history, his real life. But when you look and think that his entire public life, almost his entire public life, he had an open case. The guy was out on bail almost all of his appearances in life, and then he ends up his career doing a tour with G. Gordon Liddy.
I know, touring the country hand in hand, probably like staying in adjoining hotel rooms and pretending like they're enemies or something when it's obviously, they're enjoying themselves, putting on that guy, I really never really accepted Leary as legit. what was he doing? He was doing LSD research at Harvard. We know who was funding that research. It's not it's no big mystery, I think his whole firing or whatever was staged, to give him street cred, and he basically moved from the university out into conducting open air MK Ultra operations. But he stayed. Where did he stay? At the Millbrook estate. It's owned by who is it owned by? Like the Mellon family or something. I mean, the guy's he's.
Then there was that whole where he was convicted. They put him in jail, supposedly because he wrote the psychological testing. They put him in a low-security wing of the jail. Then he claims that he climbed out of a window on telephone wires, and the Weather Underground helped him break out of jail. Then they take him to and then he rats everybody out. He kills off everybody.
Yeah, what did he went to Algiers or something, and who was it?
Black Panther.
The Black Panther leader guy, I can't remember his name, told him to hit the road or something. He didn't want him around.
Yeah, they actually picked him up the night he was having dinner with someone from the American Embassy. He was dealing with the State Department people, and they came and they picked him up and they took him out of the country. Now I got involved with the Yippies in New York City back around 78, 70. I was, and we had heard back at that time that Leary was a rat and couldn't be trusted. So the Yippies at that point, Dana Beale and Aaron Kay and those kind of guys, Paul Krasner, all the guys from High Times magazine, they all were saying at that point that Leary was CIA and stuff like that, and not to trust him. But what was I going to say is, but at the same time, Dave, at the same time when we were down there. We were the subject of COINTELPRO and FBI surveillance and that kind of stuff. So, no, how do you think that meets out?
I don't know. You mentioned the Weather Underground. I'm not at all convinced that was ever a legitimate organization. Actually, what are your thoughts? Do you think the Weather Underground was on the level?
Yeah, I do. At the point when my first-hand information was that was in, I think it was Rockland County, New York, when they were like fugitives for years later, and they got involved in that bank robbery and they killed those cops and guards and stuff like that. Yeah, I believe those guys were for real. I don't believe that was a setup. I think those were legitimate revolutionaries. Yeah.
Well, the even more militant version that was what was it, the SLA? That was definitely, in my opinion, anyway, that was definitely a government-run operation.
Oh, absolutely.
Remember with the kidnapping of Patty Hearst and all, and the firebombing of the house down in L.A. and all of that whole thing. All of those people were the people at the top of that organization were seriously questionable, and and the Manson family too. There are indications that the Manson family, that was right around the same time or just before the SLA. I believe that the state, basically created the whole hippie movement and the whole commune, phenomenon and all that. And then basically created those entities to kill it back off. The SOA was kind of meant to discredit the more militant, Weather Underground, SDS type of movements, and the Manson family was meant to discredit the notion of the peaceful hippies, living in the commune.
Well, when you talk about the SLA, it's interesting because the 7 heads of the snakes for the SLA, their emblem, are the 7 feasts of Kwanzaa. Did you know that?
No.
Yeah, check it out. Look that up one day. Look up the poster of the SLA, their snake with 7 heads, the Sudanese Liberation Army, and then look up the Feast of Kwanzaa for the fictitious African holiday that was merged with Christmas.
Well,
and it's the same.
That whole SLA grew out of some kind of black empowerment prison movement, right? That was led by I can't remember the guy's name, but he was from Colton Westbrook, I think was his name, a black CIA guy that had previously worked on the Phoenix program over in Vietnam, and then he, headed up this Black Cultural Alliance or whatever. I don't remember what the hell it was called, some sort of thing in prison, and that's where the SLA came from. And Westbrook, supposedly by some reports, is the guy that actually that came up with the name and that designed that logo and gave DeFreeze his nickname of, what was it, Thank-You or something like that. And, that was all constructed in a prison, MK Ultra program, basically, run out of Vacaville prison. Yeah. Correct, yeah.
Amazing.
Which is where Charlie also did time, of course, and, various other people at, so yeah, it was all of that was very very elaborately choreographed to serve a function.
Well,
basically.
Don't forget, Charlie Manson too was also at Boys Town.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, indeed he was. He was. He had all kinds of curious connections. I mean, he basically spent almost his entire all of his teen years and adult years in prison up until, which, by the way, Charlie Manson was never a hippie, which is one of the great, misnomers is that he was, he had the look, at least when he was arrested, although I have pictures of him 4 months before he was arrested. He, nothing like that. He was, very short-haired, clean-cut guy. When he was arrested, and all the pictures that we see of him, he looks like the quintessential hippie with the, beard and long hair and, the ratty-ass clothes or whatever. But, Charlie Manson was never a hippie. He was a career convict, that got out of prison. He had contempt for the whole notion of hippies. But he was cast as a hippie because that was his role, was to sort of discredit the notion that, the peaceful, peace and love hippie commune, that there was actually, this dark underbelly, to that whole thing. And, it was quite...
And in a couple of weeks, I have coming up as a guest, Scott Michaels, who's the director of 6 Degrees of Helter Skelter. Did you ever see that documentary?
I think I probably did. I've read a lot. I mean, you could fill up a whole, bookcase with the literature, just the books that have been written on Manson and the documentaries and whatnot. I've seen so many they kind of overlap after a while, but that rings a bell. I think I probably have. You
would like his work, okay? It dovetails a lot with yours. And one of the things I picked up from his documentary was that Charles Manson was partners in a escort service. I think it was called Star Entertainment or Star Talent or something like that. With offices, everyone thinks that Charles Manson is this guy out at Spahn Ranch in abandoned ghost towns and stuff. But this guy had an office in town with a partner where they ran escort services.
Yeah, it's probably Jack Gerard or something like that, and Bobby Beausoleil, one of his first lieutenants, was involved in that too. He was the driver that would bring these girls to clubs and private functions and whatnot, and he was a pimp. He was the notion most people have is that he got out of jail and he picked up a VW van and started driving around and doing hippie stuff. That's not the reality at all. He was a very well connected guy, and he had deep connections in Hollywood actually, and deep connections to the whole Laurel Canyon scene. All of them did. And not just in regards to the Manson murders, just about every one of those people, with the exception of Stephen Parent, the young kid who just seems to have been in the wrong place at the wrong time, every one of those people had deep connections. Both the killers and victims alike were, integral, very close, very much integrated into the Laurel Canyon scene, and they most likely knew each other.
Yeah.
Abigail Folger and Frykowski were actually they were renting a house in Laurel Canyon on Woodrow Wilson Drive. I've been by there and taking pictures of it. It still stands. And, it was right across the road from Mama Cass's house, which was a regular gathering spot for all the Laurel Canyon musical royalty, and both the homes, which were, like I say, right across from each other, were frequented by all kinds of shady, high-level drug dealers, and there were ties between Cass knew that they all knew each other, and if people like Terry and Sanders be believed, Charles Manson was one of the people that dropped by Mama Cass's house. So these people all and by John Phillips' house, according to Sanders, I think one of the two has said, and so these people were all. They were all in the same circles,
Roman Polanski suspected John Phillips of the murders and went to his house and broke into his house and stole an address book so he could compare the writing to the writings on the wall.
Well, John Phillips and Mama Cass both were on the official witness list for the trial. They were scheduled to be called as witnesses, but the state never called them. They somehow pulled some strings and kept their names out of that. But they were so closely tied that they were scheduled to appear as witnesses. Manson had been to the Polanski's house. He knew, and. He was very close to the scene. He's lived for an entire summer with Dennis Wilson. He'd recorded in Brian Wilson's home studio. Terry Melcher had recorded him. Greg Jacobson had recorded him. Bobby Beausoleil actually had his own apartment in Laurel Canyon for a while and was one time the rhythm guitarist for one of the premier Laurel Canyon bands, Love, before he was replaced by Brian McLean. And Jay Sebring, he was a business partner of John Phillips. He was the guy that designed, that created Jim Morrison's famous, hairstyle. And every one of these people were very, very tightly integrated. Every one of them: Sharon Tate, Jay Sebring, Frykowski, Folge, Manson. His family, all these people were very closely connected, and they all swam in the same social circles,
Dave, the break came early, okay? But this is that long break I was telling you about. You can take a little, have a drink, and go do what you got to do. But we have Dave McGowan, my hero, man. This is the kind of work that should have a Pulitzer Prize. Dave McGowan, the author of Program to Kill, the author of Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, the author of Understanding the F Word, the author of Derailing Democracy, and he has a website called Center for an Informed America, davesweb.cnhost.com. You check out that website. This guy has everything from 9/11 to the PC Sniper. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to the Opperman Report. I was on mute. Sorry about that. Okay. Welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman, every Friday night, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. We're a listener-sponsored station, so if you like what you hear, please visit the website, freedomslips.com, and hit the donate button. The show is going so fast. We have less than an hour left. This is probably one of my favorite guests. I feel like when I was a kid, my dad took me to meet Mickey Mantle at Yankee Stadium. We have Dave McGowan, the author of Program to Kill, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, Understanding the F Word, and Derailing Democracy. His website is Center for an Informed America. Now, Dave, we were talking about Charlie Manson when we left, right? But I got a question for you. Yeah. Do you have something else you want to add?
Just to kind of wrap up, I would say that, the prevailing image that most people have of the Manson murders was that it was sort of this group of dirty, grungy, vagabond hippies that, ate out of dumpsters that, randomly attacked this, elite group of Hollywood socialites just sort of randomly, and that couldn't really be further from the truth. As I was saying, these people traveled in the same social circles. They had mutual friends, they hung out at the same places, they had mutual interests, and and didn't necessarily live the way that that we were led to believe. Charlie at times had some very wealthy benefactors. One of whom was Dennis Wilson. Gave him very luxurious accommodations. And Charlie was shuttling around town in Wilson's Ferrari and Mercedes. And Charlene Caffritz, wealthy socialite. Also, put him up in very nice accommodations for a while, and Cass Elliott may have been possibly a financial contributor, and we know what happened to all three of them, by the way. All three of them ended up dead under unusual circumstances. So the image that we have is pretty far removed from the reality of what actually occurred in the notorious Manson murders that everyone knows about, but not nearly as well as they think they do, let's just say. So.
Even when they were out in Death Valley, they had dune buggies. They got that bus out there somehow. They must have towed it or pushed it or something. They had something to help them get that bus out there. And they had military field telephones.
Yeah, they did, and they had all kinds of, what was then state-of-the-art film and, still photography and motion picture cameras and whatnot. They had all sorts of filming equipment out there as well, and basically they were just handed over the, first the Spawn Movie Ranch and then the Barker Ranch, just say you can have these properties, do whatever you So, they seem to have had a guardian angel, looking over their shoulder. Because they were much better financed, and which is not to say that he didn't send his troops out dumpster diving, which apparently he did, but Charlie himself always seemed to have a pretty steady financial backing, so to speak, and apparently was doing quite a bit of high level drug dealing as well, if various reports are to be believed. So there was a lot going on there. Much more beyond. Hey, go ahead.
One thing that's always, I've never heard you talk about before, but that's struck my attention about this period of time, is the trip that John Lennon and May Pang took to California. And they were sort of traveling in these same circles as well, weren't they?
Whenabouts was that?
During the Lost Weekend when John Lennon hooked up with May Pang. And he left New York, and they were even talking about buying a house in California, and I believe in the Laurel Canyon, and they were talking about being at Terry Melcher's house and all that kind of stuff as well.
Well, yeah, he definitely was. Yeah, he was. I'm not sure about the specific circumstances that you're talking about, but he was definitely very much a part of the scene for a while during his heavy drinking days. Him and Harry Nilsson were big time drinking buddies, and they were regulars on the Laurel Canyon scene for a period of time. Definitely, they went to all the there were houses in Laurel Canyon that just sort of served as open houses, just sort of part of their 24-hour party houses where these people would just drop in and party and jam together and write songs and whatnot, and it was on the surface a really cool scene and all that, and so there were a number of houses, the log cabin that was run by Frank Zappa, and John Phillips' house and Mama Cass's house, and one of the Monkeys' houses, and they were just sort of these regular gathering spots where I just completely lost my train of thought. Where was I going with that?
What about Elliot? Don't worry about it. You're doing great. What about Elliot Mintz? How does he fit into all this? Does he ever come up in this Laurel Canyon scene?
Elliot Mintz, was he the photographer?
No, he was right now he's the super agent. He's the agent for Paris Hilton and them guys. But he was best friends with John Lennon. And the night that John Lennon was assassinated in New York City, he mysteriously hopped on a plane because he knew that Lennon had died, and was able to get here, before the announcement was made that he was shot.
Yeah, I do not know. His name has never come up in any of the, extensive amount of reading that I've done. It's not a name that, obviously not a name that's ringing any bells. So,
Let me see if I get it right.
yeah, I mean, it's quite possible. I mean, it's amazing how many things and people were connected to the Laurel Canyon scene. The neocon, what we now know as the neocon cabal, was given birth in Laurel Canyon in the early to mid '60s. And
really? Let's hear about that.
Oh yeah. I have quotes in what was this guy? What was like founding fathers and guiding light, the Rand Corporation. Had a home in Laurel Canyon, and his disciples, who would regularly gather in his house, were people like Zalmay Khalilzad, and I think maybe Wolfowitz, and all these guys who later became what we now know as the neocon cabal, the PNAC, the Project for a New American Century crowd.
Yeah.
That was given birth in Laurel Canyon in the early '60s. I have quotes from people saying, yeah, they would all gather around and huddle around in a circle on the floor of so-and-so's home in Laurel Canyon, and this is at the very same time where, 3 blocks away, there's a group of hippies sitting around in a circle, and future California Governor Jerry Brown and his Lieutenant Governor Mike Herb were both a part of the Laurel Canyon scene as well. And by some reports, there was actually a male brothel that was operating there, whose clientele included people like Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover, and various other unnamed politicians and military and law enforcement people who frequented this high-end male brothel. So you have this tiny little residential neighborhood where coexisting, you have the guys who are very soon going to become the governor and lieutenant governor of the state. You have the guys that are going to become the neocon cabal. You've got Lookout Mountain Laboratory. You got J. Edgar Hoover, various people coming in and out. You got all the people that work at Lookout Mountain Laboratory coming in and out. And, all of these disparate elements, coexisting in this little tiny community where, on the surface it's all rock and roll and peace and love, but yet you have all these shadowy political operatives that were, very much active in the scene. So it's, it was just a whole bundle of weirdness.
When you start saying it that way, it's terrifying. It really is terrifying to think that the neocons were down there too as well. Okay. Yeah,
this is all, that's all stuff that came about, and a lot of that, some of that is new information that wasn't, previously. So like I said, there's a lot of, so anybody that thinks that they've already read this whole story because they followed it online, I think there's a new preface, like I said, there's a new foreword. There is, I believe, 6 new chapters. There's a new epilogue. And also, which, by popular demand, there is both an index and a bibliography, which makes it, much more useful as, in the future as a research tool to, check my sources and find what you're looking for. So yeah, there's a lot more information in there now, and some of this, which I can't even remember what was posted and what wasn't. So some of this stuff may not be familiar even to those who have read the Laurel Canyon series. Yeah, there was just a lot of weirdness going. A lot of elements that just don't, where the pieces just don't quite together.
And one of them is that we can't is Wonderland.
Wonderland, the Wonderland Murders?
Yes, the Wonderland Murders.
Well, yeah, that was July of '81, I think. Yeah, the Wonderland Murders, which which occurred right in Laurel Canyon on Wonderland Avenue, just up the street from the Wonderland School, and actually just a few blocks from where Jerry Brown was living at the time, and a stone's throw away from the homes of various singer-songwriters, musicians, and whatnot. They one of the.
Is that the same Wonderland School where there were child molestation accusations?
There's never. I don't believe there has ever been at the Wonderland School. No, it's just other than it's weird that it's named the Wonderland School. Which obviously is a reference to
Alice.
Why am I drawing my blood? Allison, what's it? Carroll, Lewis Carroll.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is isn't it great that the children's literature that we. The stuff that we raise our kids on is like written by pedophiles.
Well, if I don't know if you watch the cartoons nowadays, if you put on the cartoon channel in the middle of the night, it's almost every single cartoon and commercial is all Satanism. It's blatant Satanism, and the toy industry.
But it's been that way for a long time. It's it's a lot more blatant now. But there's ample evidence that that Lewis Carroll and L. Frank Baum were both very avid occultists and likely pedophiles. And yet that's the literature that we raise our kids on. The Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland. What could be better, right? So. I don't know how we got on that topic. The Wonderland School. The Wonderland murders, yeah. So the Wonderland murders actually occurred right in Laurel Canyon. 4 people dead. A fifth gal who was bludgeoned nearly to death. And, widely considered by seasoned LAPD homicide folks to be, quite possibly the Manson and the Wonderland murders together are basically considered the 2 most just bloody, brutal mass murder sites, in the city's history, in the city's very, very bloody history. Both involving 5 victims. All 5 died on Cielo Drive, and 4 of the 5 died on one. But the thing is that both of these crimes were directly and very much a part of this whole peace and love scene. They kind of provided bookmarks. One coming in the late '60s and the other one in the early '80s. They sort of bookmarked the musical years of Laurel Canyon, and which again doesn't really fit the whole peace and love vibe. And not only did the Wonderland murders occur in Laurel Canyon, but there were definite Hollywood and Laurel Canyon connections. One of the guys from Three Dog Night, Chuck Negron, he admitted that he was a regular customer of theirs, and that he had planned on being there that very night to make a purchase, but he didn't make it over. So these are guys that were like supplying, the Laurel Canyon scene, and they got, brutally murdered, and, there's, of course, the involvement of John Holmes, so you got the whole porn angle, and, so it was a very speedy story, and, but, again, it's just, and those are just the 2 most high-profile, mass murders that are associated directly to Laurel Canyon. In between them, there are just countless, individual murders and questionable violent deaths, that occurred, some of which are acknowledged as murders, like Ramon Navarro, silent film actor, murdered in his Laurel Canyon home in Halloween of 1969, I think, and Sal Mineo, murdered in the garage of his home at the mouth of Laurel Canyon around, the early 70s, I want to say. There's a lot of blood spilled in that canyon during an era that was supposed to be all about peace, love, and understanding,
Getting back to the Wonderland murders, though, now, the cops who investigated that were, if I'm not mistaken, Dale and Van Adder, the same cops who investigated O.J., correct?
I'm not sure. I know Van Adder's definitely investigated another Laurel Canyon-related murder that was originally thought to be one of the hillside stranglings and was later attributed to the guy known as the dating game killer, Rodney Alcala.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's another. Charles Manson's not the only serial killer connected to Laurel Canyon. That's another one of the revelations that has been added to the book. His first victim was the daughter of a record company executive who was snatched just outside the Chateau Marmontel at the Laurel Canyon in like 1969. Another one of his victims was this gal named Ellen Jane Hover, who just happened to be the daughter of the founder and owner of Ciro's nightclub. And a third of his victims was dumped at the northern end of Laurel Canyon, just adjacent to Marlon Brando's house, actually. Marlon Brando was actually questioned by Philip Van Adder to see if he had seen anything, because the body was actually found within viewing distance of his home. And so Van Adder definitely investigated that one. It was a very, very questionable killing that, like I say, originally it was credited to the Hillside Strangler team of Bianchi and Bono, and then later they said, oh, no, we were wrong serial killer. It was actually Alcala. So, but I don't know. You know what? I think Tom Lang, I think, was, now that you mention, actually either Van Adder or Lang was involved in the Wonderland.
Right.
Because one of them actually went into court and asked for leniency for Eddie Nash, the guy who reportedly ordered it, or ordered
really? On what basis?
That he was old and sick, and that he shouldn't. And I'm like, but he ordered the most brutal mass murder in the. The guy. Yeah, he actually, I think that's actually covered in Program to Kill. That's not covered, which is, one of the weirdest things about this.
You gotta come back to my show and we'll do a show about Program to Kill.
I mean, that's one of the that's one of the weirdest things about this story, and what really hooked me and intrigued me is that there's so many overlaps between my serial killer book and my Laurel Canyon book, it's uncanny, actually.
Let me
Van Adder, I think it was Tom. I think it was Lang. I think it was Lang that actually.
Right.
But it might have been Van Adder. One of the two. One of the two of them definitely went into court and asked for leniency for Eddie Nash.
Unbelievable. But
it took him years to get him to even successfully prosecute, because the first trial he paid off one of the jurors.
Oh yeah, the guy was super powerful. But we can't leave Wonderland without talking about Scott Thornton.
Oh that's it. He was connected too. Yeah, the Liberace guy who then got didn't he get all shot up later or something? That whole.
He was a teenager. He was a victim of Liberace, the pedophile. He was 14, 15 years old when that Liberace. They got this guy addicted to meth. He was Michael Jackson's boyfriend too,
And then they make a movie about, HBO makes this movie about it's some great love story, and he wins all kinds of awards and shit.
Matt Damon played him. What's your language? Yeah, we can't talk. It's
sorry.
Yeah, we're on FM too as well. Hey, I hope you're careful the whole night. Well, listen, we're down to about 3 minutes before the break. We're gonna have another break coming up. But the whole Scott Thornton, I'm gonna have Scott Thornton on as a guest because he's living right now down at the Bunny Ranch. And we have some connections in there to them. So he's in jail right now. As soon as he gets out, we're going to have him on the show. He's had a fascinating life because he testified against Eddie Nash. They put him in the witness protection program. Listen to this. They put this kid in the witness protection program to protect him from Eddie Nash, but meanwhile they let Liberace rape him his whole childhood. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah, his whole life arc is just bizarre. But I mean, there was some shooting at some point? Wasn't he involved in some kind of a? Didn't he get?
I'm sure he's been shot. The guy's had some crazy life, man. You know.
Yeah, he got shot like multiple times. I'm thinking. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he did. He's definitely had a colorful life. Yeah, that's for sure. That's an understatement.
All right, we're getting down to the last minute. We got 1 minute left here then we've got one more segment after that. Dave, sometimes we do an after show where it's not live on the radio, but it's recorded to my YouTube channel. So if, think about that during the break. If you'd like to do maybe a half hour after the show, we could take some calls too. And it gets a whole nother YouTube channel, so you get more views and stuff like that and more hits. But we're on with Dave McGowan, my hero, author of Program to Kill. I'm serious, Dave. Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, Understanding the F-Word, Derailing Democracy. He has a website called Center for an Informed America. The guy's an encyclopedia of all this kind of bizarre information. Who would have thought that these guys, these Rumfelds and these APAC guys, were down there at the canyon as well? You know, when you think about what's going on there, it's just frightening. We'll be back right after this break with Dave McGowan. Thank you. Okay, we're back with the Opperman Report, Friday night, 5 p.m., Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Ed Opperman, private investigator. We have with us tonight a Mickey Mantle of radio guests. Okay, Dave McGowan, the author of Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, which is his new book coming out. A lot of people are familiar with the information, but there's a lot of new stuff in this book, and you can even get an autographed copy, which is a real treasure to have. So, Dave, we were talking about Scott Thornton, you know.
I just looked it up actually during the break because I didn't want to be giving out bad information on your show. And it was 1989 that he appeared as a witness in the prosecution of Nash. And in 1980, he was shot 5 times in his hotel room in Jacksonville, Florida.
Did they give a motive for the shooting?
So his protection thing. And another thing, one thing I didn't know is that apparently that HBO movie Behind the Candelabra was actually based on his book. So he must have made a pretty penny off of that, I would imagine, optioning off the film rights on that.
You know what? You'd think so, but I don't think so, because I know he got arrested again, and he's living he's in jail right now, but he was living at the Bunny Ranch in Reno, Nevada, along with, I think, who's that guy? John Wayne Bobbitt is living back there, too. So that guy...
Are you kidding me?
No. Yeah.
That guy's still around? The surgical reattachment guy?
Dennis Hoff is he's like the home for wayward. You know, I think you and me might wind up living there one day. Okay, so let's be nice, because we may have nowhere to go, man. We'll have adjoining rooms at the ranch.
God, I have not heard that name in the longest time. I remember that's the Lorena.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure he's down at the Bunny Ranch as well. Did I just lose you, Dave? Oh, I think we lost. Maybe I got lost. Maybe I'm not with you. Let's check. Oh, no, I see. And we did lose Dave, and I'll get him back, like one of my favorite guests. Okay. We got a better connection anyway, because the last one was getting a little goofy. But here we are, the Opperman Report, with our guest Dave McGowan. The author of Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. Yes, this is Accurate Information Recovery, Bill Collectors. Is Dave McGowan there?
No, he just left the premises.
There you go, man. Okay, very good. Yeah, I guess we got dumped or something like that. We make too many jokes about Dennis Hoff, and they cut your phone lines in Nevada. Okay.
I guess so.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
So anyway, yeah, I have not heard that name in the longest time. Whatever happened to the other half of that duo, Lorena Bobbitt? Is she still out there? I would think she'd have a hard time getting dates. You know?
Yeah, right, you think so, right? I think she's keeping a little pro. You know, but I want to get into it. Yeah.
She probably changed her name, I would imagine, years ago.
Or got married. You know, she could have got married and then her name would change. But in my business, I could find all these people here. It's fun. You can get a hold of people, and now I got the radio show, and I have an excuse to bother people. But let me ask you now, all this stuff. I want to ask you a couple of things. James Taylor. What is James Taylor's connection in the canyon? Do you have him connected to any of these kind of weird stuff?
He was definitely a part of the scene. I did not find anything in his family background that was, suggestive. But then again, that stuff's not always, readily apparent. I mean, in all the biographies written of like Dennis Hopper, his dad is described as a farm, but he came out several years before his death and, admitted that my dad was never a farmer. I was a OSS CIA asset,
Wow.
So, it was just because on the surface they appear to, have a civilian job, it doesn't mean that they necessarily do. So, it's hard to tell. But, he definitely had some mental issues, and he'd spent time in at least 2 mental homes mental hospitals before he emerged on the Laurel Canyon scene. So, who knows what kind of tinkering was going on, and it's hard to say. I was not able to find nearly as much about him as I did on various of the other luminaries of the Laurel Canyon scene.
Okay, now what about Jennifer Asher, who was the girlfriend of Paul McCartney? Do you have any connection with her and her brother? I think his name was Peter Asher.
Peter Asher enters into the scene and then. He's like part of this clique that kind of hung out with Brian Wilson, I think, for a while, and who else? Van Dyke Parks and various other figures. But I just kind of came across his name sort of just in passing here and there. Nothing that really stood out as.
Did you ever come up with
really
anything?
Set off any alarm bells.
As far as Peter Asher being a member of the Process Church?
No, I've never heard. No, never heard that. No, no.
Okay,
I've heard, I've heard John Phillips. I've heard, Terry Melcher. Possibly Cass Elliott, and, various others. But no, not. Which is not to say that he wasn't. But
yeah.
It's just it hasn't come up in anything that I've encountered.
Okay, very good. Now, what about the names? Do you know the name Gorish, who was the photographer who took the picture of Mark David Chapman right before he killed Lennon?
No, No,
because,
that's a new one on me.
Okay, you got to look into this stuff. We have to talk about this stuff off the air, okay? There's a lot of good stuff. Okay. I'll tell you the whole story. When I was at Yippie headquarters, the weekend John Lennon got killed, I met Mark David Chapman there. I met him at Yippie headquarters. I was like 18 years old, 17 years old in high school, and he went on to kill Lennon a couple of days later. And he also confronted James Taylor at the subway station in New York City. And that part of the story is covered up a lot. Now, he had his picture taken by this guy, Peter Gorish, who described himself at the time as being a photographer, but also, too, as being a store detective, and he wanted to become a cop. But then later on, he said that he became a photographer because he was hired by guys in the Beach Boys to be their photographer and go and take pictures of them. So I'm assuming that he had to be connected up there with that Laurel Canyon bunch if he was with the Beach Boys.
That's all news to me. I've never heard of that angle on the Lennon assassination. It's interesting, but that's. Unfortunately, if there was a connection, it didn't make it into the book. I don't want to learn any new stuff now because then I'll just be kicking myself in the butt because I didn't get it in the book before I got off to my final. I just signed off on the very reluctantly. It's very difficult for me to let go of. Yeah. And I just signed off on the final. We went round and round on various changes, and I went through that thing so many times with a fine-tooth comb, and I'm sure there's still a few errors here and there and a few options that I'll hate Celine. But at some point I had to let it go and sign off on it and let them do their thing, and I did it very, very reluctantly, but so I got in as much good stuff as I could, but I'm sure there's I'm sure there's bits of this, maybe there could even be a part 2 someday. Who knows?
Obviously there can, because there's a ton of more information to come out. But how many years were you working on this on the website?
Longer than I thought. I didn't, when I started to look back at the dates of the first postings that I put up, apparently it's like 7 years or something, 6 or 7 years. It's quite a while.
Yeah, it looks like it's been going on forever. You've done a ton of work on this kind of stuff. It's just amazing. So, what else about Laurel Canyon do you really want to get out, or do you want to discuss a little bit about your other books? Because we've only got about 15 minutes.
Let's see. Is there any major stuff, Laurel Canyon stuff we've missed out? I don't want to spoil everything.
No, I got you.
One thing I could put out there. I have a Facebook page, and which I put up at my publisher's insistence. I'm not a big social media fan at all. I have no social media presence whatsoever. I try to avoid that. The only Facebook page I actually have is under my dog's name, and all the personal information is hers, because I'm not a big fan of oversharing of personal information. But my publisher insists that that's a key part of any marketing strategy these days, is to get out there on Facebook and get as many likes as possible, because that has some kind of deep meaning apparently. So for anyone who's interested, the page is www.facebook.com, Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, all written as all one word with no spaces or dashes or punctuation or anything. And that's where one thing, that's where all the images, that accompany the story are. All my own personal photos that I've taken of the landmark locations in Laurel Canyon and whatnot, and various vintage photos of the people and places that populated the canyons, just to provide a little bit of visuals to go with the story. And also where I'm updating, keeping updated information on, availability and the availability of the signed copies and of the hardback and paperback, and various stuff like that. There's a sample chapter, and so that's the place to go to keep updated on when the hardcover will be available, when the signed copies will be available, and whatnot. And also I'm supposed to pander for likes. So if you go there and like what you see, please hit the like button, because it impresses my publisher. And I guess that's probably about it for.
If you're already on Facebook,
what's that?
If you're a member of Facebook and you just put in there Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon, it'll pop up right away. If you already have a Facebook account, and then you just hit like and stuff like that. And there is a lot of good information on there. I did like it myself quite a while ago. Are you going to be doing any book signings like in bookstores?
I don't know yet. I'm hoping so. One thing that I found out just a few weeks ago, which is just like the weirdest thing ever, is that the Grammy Museum right here in LA, in conjunction with the Getty Center, which is two of the big museum groups here, are putting on specifically an exhibit celebrating the Laurel Canyon music and counterculture scene of the late 1960s and early 1970s. And it's scheduled to debut in May, literally days after my book is released, which is like the weirdest thing. I just read it in the LA Times a couple of weeks ago, and they were talking to the museum director, and he was saying something to the effect of, we think it's time, after all these years that we, shine a spotlight in our own backyard and, kind of highlight this great musical scene that went on right here. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, it's only like 50 years, but how weird is it that they're doing that almost literally like in conjunction with the release of my book? And So now I'm racking my brain trying to figure out ways that I can exploit that to my advantage. I've thought about like printing up like thousands of flyers and running around the parking lot and flyering all the cars. I'd love to set up a table right at the entrance to the museum and sign books there, but I think they might frown upon that. But
they might send one of those serial killers down there to greet you.
Yeah. It just seems like a golden marketing opportunity, just like a gift that just landed in my lap, and now I just have to figure out how I can hijack it to my advantage. Because you're gonna have all these people coming out of there that are interested and just have their awareness of that scene raised, and are going to be curious about getting additional information and. I've got a much different story to share with them if they're willing to, so that's, that's just sort of a marketing opportunity that just kind of fell from the sky. And, but as far as like, like read and sign type events, I know my publisher is working on that, but, at this point I don't really know yet.
Oh, very good. Hey, get this. My producer Ann says that this radio station she's involved with is involved with that, and she can figure something out for you. So hey, we're networking for you, bro.
With that exhibit, I was so thrilled when I woke up and read the paper just a few weeks ago. I'm like, you got to be kidding me! What are they?
Yeah, but
that was very nice of them. That was so nice of them to do that.
Wait, don't you think that maybe they're doing this to take attention away from your book and maybe to divert things away from you?
I don't know. Some people have said, why don't you just contact them? Why don't you get a hold of them and see if they want to do like some kind of a joint thing with you? I'm like, I'm pretty sure they're not going to really want to talk to me too much, And, a lot of these people are still alive, and here we are in LA, in Hollywood, and so I'm sure that some of these people are probably going to be directly involved, the people themselves are their handlers or whatever of these various artists. And I don't think too many of them are going to really want to be associated with me in the way that they are portrayed in my book. I just kind of have a feeling that they may not want to have a whole lot to do with me, so I'm going to have to do some guerrilla marketing.
Well, that brings up the question. How did you get the book deal? Because this is pretty big opposition, These guys have big PR teams and stuff like that. I've been involved in some big cases where things have been silenced and people have been shut up. Now, how did you get the book deal, considering this is such inflammatory information?
I don't know. I was very skeptical. They're based in England. For one, they're in London. They're not here, so I don't know. Maybe that gives them a little more leeway. But
yeah.
I was very skeptical, and at first when they first approached me, I wasn't really interested, and they were pretty persistent. And the guy eventually called me from overseas and talked for quite a while, and convinced me. I got a good vibe from it. But throughout the whole process, I was very skeptical of how they were going to handle this material, and I just had a very bad feeling that they were going to do some heavy editing and that I was not going to be happy with the final product, and it was could very well just turn into a very bad situation where they're wanting to put something out under my name that I do not that I would not want to be some watered down version that I would not want to claim as my own, but that didn't happen, and like I say, the final version that I just signed off on 3 weeks ago was, I have no complaints at all. They let me speak in my own voice. They were great, just really good to work with, and whether that comes back to bite them in the rear, I have no idea, but I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Be a big seller. Now, Dave, would you be willing to do like an after show with me, and we could take some calls from listeners and stuff like that? Because I'm getting a lot of messages. Oh, please. Even just 15 minutes.
I would if I could, but unfortunately, I already have prior commitments here. If I had known about it in advance, I probably could have worked something out. But yeah, I can't. Unfortunately,
okay, don't worry
I can't
about
really.
it. No, I appreciate the time you gave us. We're going to beg you to come back, man. I want to do a whole show about Program to Kill, and the whole. So why don't you give us a brief overview, because we only got about another 8 minutes. What Program to Kill is about, and the whole history of pedophilia being involved with, and these pedophile cults being involved with these serial killers, and how a lot of them seem to be more organized than appears in the media.
Yeah, that was a work that I'm very proud of. It was probably my finest work that I did prior to this book. I think this book is probably. I've improved as a writer. I mean, when I first started, I had no idea. I had no formal training whatsoever. I was just winging it, and I really, when I read some of my early work, I just cringe. Oh my God, did I really write that? And I've definitely improved as a writer. I've improved as a researcher, and I think that this new one is probably the best work that I've ever done. But I'm still very much proud of A Program to Kill also, and that was a rough journey. I got to tell you, that was a trip down the rabbit hole that I sometimes wonder if I really, if I really should have taken or not, because that was a very eye-opening journey, and I was very skeptical about a lot of the stuff that's covered in there, about the notion of mind control, about the notion of satanic cult underground, and sort of a criminal underground, and these big organized multi-perpetrator pedophile groups, and a lot of I'm very, very skeptical of, and unfortunately, the more I dug down the rabbit hole, the more it all sort of proved to be true, and it all sort of integrated and formed a coherent story that most people don't want to hear, but unfortunately that's the reality of the world we live in, and it's a very, very dark journey. I don't really know how to summarize it other than to just say proceed with caution, because once you learn something, you can't unlearn it, and I sometimes wonder if I really need to know all of this stuff. It's
or you need to be you need to be like shedding light, shining light on these people and this kind of stuff.
I mean, this journey for me has been mostly based on my own intellectual, my own desire to understand the world that I live in and why things happen the way they do, and why things on the news so frequently do not make sense to me or didn't. And
right.
Over the last 15, 20 years, my worldview has changed dramatically, and that's both a blessing and a curse, because now when as I watch events unfold, everything makes perfect sense in its own sick and deranged way, and the world all makes sense to me now, but. Sometimes I wonder if but are essentially powerless to do anything about it, is it better to just go through life with your head in the sand, hopefully if enough people wake up, it will make a difference, so,
How about
go ahead.
threats? Have you received any threats?
Not recently. I used to mostly veiled ones, some direct ones, but it hasn't happened too much lately. But program. Okay, I can say this about Program to Kill. Was very heavily influenced by Maury Terry's work on the Son of Sam case, and his theory basically that he put forth that it wasn't just David Berkowitz, that it was a whole cult of individuals that were behind these murders, and that a lot of the reality of it was covered up, and that David Berkowitz was basically the guy who took the fall to protect the higher ups. And my book is kind of taking that and expanding it and showing that on a broader scale that that's not really unusual, that that's not an anomaly, that that's kind of a pattern that exists with quote unquote serial killer cases. And that maybe we need to re-examine and revise our whole concept and understanding of what a serial killer is, because the traditional view that we have, by way of FBI profilers and whatnot, it just doesn't add up if you subject these cases individually to a high level of scrutiny. You find the same patterns and the same threads going through these stories. So, I mean, well, I see my job is basically like pattern recognition. That's what I sort of specialize in. That's what I see myself as being very good at. And I have a very good memory also, which is either a blessing or a curse. So I retain a lot of information, names and dates and places and all that. So when I come across those names and dates and places again, they click for me in ways like I could be reading something that, most people, you would just have.
We're down to the last second. We're grateful. I want to thank you, man, for coming on.
Oh, man.
I'm going to beg you to come on.
I rambled too long, but.
No, you didn't. All your was great. Weird Scenes in the Canyon is the book coming out. Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon. Dave McGowan. I can't thank you enough, brother. We're going to have him on again as soon as we can.